Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're talking about the data-driven way to win customers' hearts. First, I want to give a quick PSA that Universal Analytics is going to be ending June 30th of 2023. I'm trying to raise awareness of this event, and part of that is through this episode and the series that it's part of, which is going to focus on the new era of data science and analytics that we can use with modern tools. Let's go to today's show. In digital marketing, we're all striving to do what works. Yet, whether we're in-house or at an agency, we're basing our definition of what works on a small sample size. Honestly, none of us can zoom out far enough to see enough websites to get the general traits of successful marketing. That is, unless you're someone who's tasked with measuring marketing data at the organization that is the single largest quantity of it on the planet. My guest has gained a lot of insight on successful sellers in his role as Google's Chief Measurement Strategist, where he has led over 2,500 engagements with the world's biggest advertisers. He's a senior fellow at Wharton and holds degrees from Purdue University and UCLA. And in his book, Converted, The Data-Driven Way to Win Customers' Hearts, the difference, and I'm simplifying here, is that the best ones humanize their funnels for buyers. Wait, you say, we already know that treating people nicely is something you should just do. We've known that since humans have been around. Yes, you're right. Yet it's surprising how we lose the human element when we move commercial interactions online. And my guest wants us to learn, or more correctly, relearn, how to make our marketing more human. Let's go listen to my talk with Neil Hoyne. I'm very glad to welcome Neil Hoyne. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Hey, Glenn. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell me the name of the book that you have come out with?
The book, Converted, The Data-Driven Way to Win Customers' Hearts. It was published in February by Penguin Random House.
Fantastic. And it takes us on quite a ride. Let's get out of the way who you are and how it fell to you to write a book about the types of information that people get to allow them to become converted as customers and hopefully the best customers. Do you have some background in this area? Have you been privy to data in this area?
I've worked with data. I generally try to avoid that for introductions because there's nothing that turns off an audience more. It's like someone comes up to you at a party. So what do you do? I do data. And you're just kind of like, wow, where do I go from here? Couldn't you be like
I see the hors d'oeuvres right behind you.
Athlete? And I'll be honest with you, in terms of the book, in terms of the work that I do, that's often the barriers because people themselves don't necessarily find data to be exciting. You think, oh, here's a data book, and it's just not something you engage with. But it's actually been a large part of my life where, for the past 11 years or so, I've been at Google working right now as their chief measurement strategist, thinking about how data is used, data is applied to actually make money. And what I find through there, I also have a senior fellowship appointment at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. And in both cases, it's either at the Google side, it's working with businesses. At the Wharton side, it's working with students to understand how we take this nebulous but important area of data and actually integrate it into the decisions that we make. And so a large component of my role is not only understanding how businesses in boardrooms, in small hushed corners of their office make decisions, and oftentimes coming to different decisions with the same data, but then also figuring out how to tell those stories, whether it's to the customers I'm interacting with on the Google side or helping internal audiences tell the stories to other stakeholders in a way where even if they're not directly paying attention to the data, they still have the benefit of what those insights are and how to apply it to their job. And so this book is really an exercise in that extent to say, in a given year, I'll have the privilege of meeting with several hundred companies, lots of boards, but you can't meet with everybody. Even in Google's large customer segment where we have tens of thousands of customers, we're still leaving behind millions of small businesses who just were like, well, I'd love to have a conversation with Neil. How do I do it? And this book was really that answer, was to say, could I give you some of those stories? Could I help you build that intuition so that data's not scary, but it's really
Yeah.
as fun, as robust as you expect it to be, but also helps you build the confidence that it's something you could do something with, which is kind of the end result.
Yes. Yes. I came away thinking you treat data as a means to an end, and that end for people like our listeners, marketers, is to do something which they would know how to do if we put them in that cocktail party. But that when it comes to digital, there are still people, particularly, as we move up the org chart, that have a difficult time conveying that human type interaction that we all know how to do and understand it by looking at data and then by finding new ways to involve ourselves with our prospects and our customers, and then have the data tell us whether or not that's working.
Exactly.
You kind of come down pretty hard on funnels. And, funnels have often been something that marketers, like to latch onto and say, well, but if we, move people from a impression and get them down to a consideration phase, and then we get them into a high engagement and decision-making phase, all will be well with the world. But, you kind of point out, as many have, that, if we were to look at this in a dating scenario, we're making things too linear. We're oversimplifying, right? Can you help us understand, if we were to look at our acquisition from a data standpoint, how we can be comfortable with the fact that a simplistic model like the funnel just ain't going to cut it?
I would say my criticism of the funnel, it's not to say that, and I'm on record if you look at other webinars and podcasts, I have nothing wrong with the idea of a funnel itself. What I have is, even in a dating scenario, it's like, well, we're dating. I'd like to eventually get married to somebody I'm dating, and you can see steps along the way. Maybe we'll move in, we're going to get engaged, and having those steps in the relationship are important. Where I push back on marketers is oftentimes where they try to assert too much control over that process, to say everybody's going to go exactly the way that I planned. We're going to go on these dates to these places. I'm going to introduce them to it at this time, because that's just
it's
not
very
how
prescriptive.
Right. And that's not how customers make decisions. And where I see marketers get frustrated is that not only do they obsess about asserting this level of control, when things don't go according to their plan, then they get frustrated. Like, they kind of throw their hands up, like, our third date, we didn't go to the movies, so this is a failure of a
Right.
relationship. And then they go back and they push on themselves, where I'm trying to say, give yourself a little bit of room here to say, look, it is fine to set goals as to how you want customer behavior to ideally present itself, but also give yourself a little bit of room to learn what's happening outside of that path, and to know that customers veering off that path that you may have set out in your mind is actually an opportunity for learning instead of a point of frustration. To say things didn't go exactly the way you wanted wasn't to say it was a failure on you not to assert the right message or the right creative, but to take a step back and to say it is very well that you're not meeting the needs of what the customers see. And to take a step back and say that's not a problem of yours. It could be a new type of customer emerging, different preferences, different means of engagement, not the right time. And when you kind of loosen up a little bit, you get to understand customers for who they are, which is very dynamic, unique individuals. And that path you may have built out may be appropriate for some customers, but there's a lot of customers, perhaps even your best customers, where those needs have not yet been met.
I think we probably get a little bit, marketers, we get a little bit enamored with the tools. I'm thinking particularly of marketing automation tools that say everything has to have stages, right? And then we're going to move over to sales, and they're going to have more stages in the CRM. That, what really drove it home for me was when you said something like, but are you saying the same thing to them when we factor in how many times you've spoken with them? So if I had somebody as a marketing qualified lead, and I hit them up with that email sequence that every marketing qualified lead gets, but I look back, you talked about a shoe purchaser.
Yes.
And, it was an ungodly number of interactions that they'd had.
And you compare them to like walking in the store, walking out of the store, and doing this every day for I don't know how long, but how silly would it be if, according to our little boxes and pigeonholes, we think, okay, because I've rated them at this stage, when they walk in the next time, I should say, hi, how are you doing today? Like, don't I know their name by this point? Right?
Yeah.
So we have to get a little more nuance than just a funnel stage.
I will even take that a step further. One of the gaps that I see, and this is kind of the interesting thing, is that when we reduce human behavior to spreadsheets and KPIs, as efficient as it may be, we lose touch with what we're actually doing. Like, well, how are we actually trying to sell? And that's because the separation is that we look at when we like the number of hits or unique visitors, or you see those organizations, they see dashboards, the numbers are going up and down, and how many people did what we wanted, and they never stop to think, well, what makes those people? Just as we would if we saw people crowding the door at a physical store or to talk to a sales rep at a conference. What is truly going on and the insights that are left by most companies. And I joke about this in the book as well around, with remarketing campaigns, messaging to people as soon as they leave your website and they didn't do what you want. And not surprisingly, we find that companies that are more aggressive on that spectrum to say, as soon as you leave my website in the first 24 hours or 72 hours, you actually see a decline in purchase intent. People recognize and respond to that aggressiveness. And I say very much in the same way that you finish off, you have a good date, and later that evening you call them up to see how things went. It's like, no, give me a little bit of space. This is how human beings respond. And it's the same thing with these marketing relationships. With the shoe buying example, I'm surprised as to how few companies will actually change their messages or their creative, anything across multiple interactions. You've been to our site 1 time, 10 times, 20 times. It's the same experience and the same conversation, something you can never pull off in the real world. Imagine somebody coming into your store, calling up a sales rep over the phone, and you talking to them in the exact same mechanical fashion. Be like, no, Neil, I just spoke to you yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, let's build off of that. It's like, I got to stick to the script. Welcome to my company. How are you doing today? So it's like, and it breaks that connection. But it also represents how extraordinarily simple a lot of these opportunities are for companies to say, if you're able just to change the way you engage with customers over multiple interactions, something that most websites ignore, the power of building that relationship and that conversation is incredible.
Yeah. Now, because of the remarketing example that you brought up, let's also remember it's not a single dimension here. We have to also think about how we're going to do this across multiple marketing channels. Mm-hmm. So now it gets fun.
Yep. I'll say this. It gets fun, but something that I need to ground everybody on is that oftentimes, and this is mentioned just in passing in the book, is that too often when we think about these stages in this customer journey, we put too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect. And especially for smaller businesses, they're like, I can't waste money. I don't want to get it wrong. And again, tying it to personal relationships, it's like, look, I want to go up to that person and say hi, but I don't want to make a fool of myself. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sit here until I figure out the perfect thing to say to them. And then once I figure that out, then I'll go talk to them. And I'm kind of pushing to say that with this, you can be imperfect. You can be messy. A lot of the best learnings come from this. It's the same way collecting different data comes from simply going out and trying and seeing how people respond. Going out and saying, I have this mentality that there has to be a relationship, that I don't collect this data, that I don't think in this way. Let's start exploring this and learning instead of trying to build perfection, whether it's that approach for customers or that entire funnel.
Yeah. And the learning, as you show through the many cases in the book, it does not go in a straight line either. This is, I guess, what people call the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where you go from, I figured out a little something about this, I must be an expert. You yourself, it's pretty sobering, given how many of these you would be working with in a year, how you yourself point out that, okay, we knew nothing, and then we knew something, but we thought that was everything, but then it turned out it was something else. There was one high-ticket item, I believe it was an auto manufacturer. You pointed out that it was the commitment to not stop at just the we know something stage. So I think what they found out that the conversations, they had a lot of people, to use the phrase tire kicking on their website,
That's a good
unintended.
way of putting it. Yeah.
And that it was interesting because when they looked at the ones who had completed the buyer journey and they looked backward, a thread that could not be ignored was the fact that many of them were looking at financing.
Mm-hmm.
That's, in retrospect, it seems obvious, but
the best stories
that
are.
moved. Right, that moved a kilter to the, okay, well, they're at this funnel stage, or we used this channel to bring them this far along, right? And now, maybe you want to tell us the rest of that story, because I think it's an important parable about how we can go overboard when we do have a little bit of knowledge about something.
I will, and I'll catch everyone up. I hope you read the book. I hope you read the story, because then you'll have a lot more context to it. But generally, the story, it revolves not only around an automaker that had the wrong expectation of success or how their customers behaved, realizing what was success. And then because they had this new metric, in their case, that financing information was an important driver of vehicle purchase decisions, where they then almost went overboard by saying, this is all we're going to do. And again,
Yeah.
I love the personal relationships. It's like my wife comes to me and says, I love that shirt, right? I'm dating her. I'm trying to impress her. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to wear this shirt every time. It doesn't work. And to bring it out, because I love telling stories, I like to put this into a much broader context of this, because people are like, God, this is difficult. I say, yes, it is. It's difficult for everybody, though. And the goal, again, going back to that common theme about perfection, is that I don't necessarily think that there's any company, there's any product that's perfect. I even joke with my wife, I'm the best person she found so far, but she'll disagree. Oh, you're perfect. I don't know. But with the same thing with engaging with these customers, is the goal isn't to have the perfect message and everything at the right time. The goal is simply to be better than the other companies and the other products that they engage with, so they feel more connected with you. And again, if most people are thinking just very much as where a lot of companies are starting, everything's a very linear funnel, same message all the time, market right away. And you're saying, and someone calls up and they're like, hey, I want to know who you are. I want to build this relationship. Well, that's different. I'm not used to hearing about that. Those simple iterations, as with the automaker, even though they're not perfect and there's more to explore, they give you a sense that you're making progress. And there's always more you can do. There's always better relationships to be had. And when you look at your progress over the years, you'll kind of look back to those early days and be like, God, it was kind of funny we did this. But it's
Yeah,
still better than what most of the market is doing today. And that's that opportunity for you to grow.
very well put. The place where you say we can bring this in and include a wider circle than I'd expected is in testing, right? Because that's how we get there.
Mm-hmm.
In many companies, it is assumed that that's something that those people over in marketing analytics do. Our CRO people, right? Our UX people, they understand how the website functions, and we're just trying to help figure out which button color people want to press on.
Yes.
But you have a much more inclusive view of who should be bringing in ideas and why we need to collect all those ideas so that we can figure out, we have a finite amount of, let's say, media budget and time, but that, we should go as wide as we can before we figure out what we're going to test first.
I mean, I think the idea there with experimentation, to kind of distill it down to its essence, is that oftentimes companies start with the levers that they have to pull, and they see what they can pull in what order. Well, we can change color. Let's change color. We know we can change landing page copy. Let's change that. And really what best-in-class companies do is they take a step back and they start with the hypothesis. It very much is to how you should do data analysis. A lot of companies will say, let's jump right into the dashboards and see what they have. And then they'll see like a map of the US and be like, oh, Wyoming's red. Let's figure out why. No, start with the hypothesis around what you think. No, this has happened. Right. Like I had a company that obsessed about it for like 3 weeks in the data. They're like, wow, growth is really happening in Brazil. What's going on? And it becomes kind of this exploration where you're going through and you're peeling back layers of data. And I swear Hollywood has to play a role in this, where they see a whole bunch of people who are like, how do we do data analysis? And they just see like a whole bunch of people like me just banging away on computers. And they're like, all of a sudden, like, in these great visual animations, like the number comes out and be like, this is the secret number. It's like, no, there's no aha moment often with this data. But what companies
Yeah.
do instead is they want to manage that process, and they say, look, let's leave the data aside for a moment. Let's not even open up a spreadsheet or a dashboard. Let's start with the hypothesis that we have. What do we think is going on in the market? Or if we've been in previous companies or previous experiences, where do we think opportunities are? And those opportunities shouldn't be gated just to your function, because very well somebody on email could have an idea for paid search, or display could have an idea for, customer service. It doesn't matter. But you do start with that first thing to say, what is the hypothesis? And then you make them challenge them for a moment to say, but you need to have some data behind it. Now, this seems a little bit odd because I just told you a moment ago, don't start with the data. No, I'm saying the hypothesis, but I'm saying you need to go back and think, why do I think this hypothesis is true? And that opens the door to say, here's previous experience at other companies that I've had. Here's research that I've read. Here's a silly book that I came across. But some data substantiate that what you have is more than your gut playing out. Then the third is, then you get to
and we're getting the gut there, right?
There you
because
go.
we have our own biases. When you were including that list of people to go, you said include your agencies. Fresh eyes can often help point out things that someone who's too close to it won't see.
We're going to get on to segments, but I'll first take a moment to talk about the switch Google's making to their whole analytics platform. There are many ways to move to Google Analytics 4 out there, and one of them that's included for free with GA4 is the web analytics data that you see in the interface, but in database form. You can seize this chance to consolidate raw Google Analytics data with your other systems. And since you're going on a full-blown migration to a new product anyway, you should consider pulling in data from your other systems so that you can analyze and visualize them for your entire funnel. Now, you're going to have to learn some new things here, but you don't have to be overwhelmed by it when you have an expert personally guiding you. I'm going to be having these GA Fast Forward workshops as 2-day sessions where attendees leave with actual dashboard reports that show stakeholders the data that's tied to their business performance. So whether you've had GA4 installed already or are still on Universal Analytics, you can take advantage of this. And the next workshops are in Ottawa and Montreal in December. You can find information on them by going to gafastforward.com. So GA as in Google Analytics, and then the words fast forward. You can either use the number 4 in forward, or you can spell it all out. Either way, I'll get you there. Okay, so let's turn to customer segments.
Just to finish on that data front and who supports it and what supports it, you then say that we should kind of have a ranking process, that you think that if we push ourselves, we might be able to, and I know that you've done workshops that do this, we kind of pitch into the future and say, well, what would the company do differently if we found this out, right? If we did a small sample size, we found it, what are the implications? Like, does our call center customer service change radically? Do we, completely go into a new product area that we, see a small number of people asking? Like, this could be scary.
Well, that's the entire thing, is that brings it into focus to say, what we're really looking at here is a plan. This is something we could do for the business. And the entire purpose of experiments are, should we? And so if you're looking at this to be like, we're going to run a product test that says, if you can't implement it, if you can't make that change in your organization, or worse off, and more common the case, if you haven't brought the right stakeholders to the table to be part of that test, then I have to ask legitimately why you're prioritizing, why you're exploring it. Or what if we put this particular type of disclaimer? Will legal allow you to do that? And what it forces everyone into a mindset of saying is, not only do they need to prioritize these opportunities, but oftentimes that the groups need to work more collaboratively to see them through. If you're looking and you have a great hypothesis that could lend to a lot of change, but you need product to be on board, my hope would be that product, and this is why I asked the question, what would you do with it? If you can't get product agreement before you run that test, I don't care about the opportunity. It's never going to happen. Don't waste the time. And thinking some of the most damaging words, we'll let the data decide. I think it's wishful thinking to say any team can bring a deck over to product and be like, here, we're going to tell you your product direction.
Yeah.
Or any marketing team, paid search, can be like, here's evidence why we should take money away from our offline counterparts. It doesn't work that way. Works that way to
Assumed.
say,
Yeah.
if this happened, we would need to shift money and shift budgets. But if you can't get the agreement for that test from offline or somebody that supersedes them that can move budget, why run that test? Because then it's just one team saying, hey, we ran a test that says we should get more money. And you can imagine the restrictions to that and why those tests are deemed not to be successful and never takes hold. 40% of the tests that I run internally with companies that show positive results means the companies, if they implemented the changes that the test proved out, would see positive growth. 40% of those changes are rejected because they never make it through the organizational gauntlet of being executed. Think about that for a moment. Opportunities
Okay.
you've already spent the time testing that will lead to growth of your business
Yeah.
are not implemented because of those organizational challenges.
It echoes the words from A Few Good Men. You want the truth, but you can't handle the truth. Yeah. Why don't you get ahead of that process, right?
That's
Ask the
it.
questions first. Go on the discovery journey first, and then if you want the answer will avail itself.
You know, I tell people in the simplest way, if you have to wait until a test is run, until the results come in to figure out what you're going to do with those results,
Yeah.
you now have to that you're accepting the limit that most of the times it won't actually take hold. If you take a step back and you say, look, we need to get that agreement, then what that does is that forces you to confront some of the organizational challenges. What are they asking for in the test? And I'll tell you, to everybody listening, that is a fantastic conversation to have. And it doesn't happen enough. If you
Right.
give somebody a data set, if you give me a data set, say you give me a data set to be like, hey, Neil, we ran an experiment to say why your team sucks. Like, and no one's ever done this, but if someone did,
Right.
I can come up with 1,001 ways to break apart that test. Be like, oh, well, you didn't look at this. You didn't look at this. Your sample size is too small. Things differed. This was a biased group. I can't believe
Right.
you have
And you
these outlined.
discredit it.
And you can do that. Anybody can do that. Anybody can. I mean,
Yeah.
you know how to challenge tests. Now, on the other hand, if you come to me and you say, Neil, we want to run a test that judges the effectiveness of your team. So before that test is run, and you say, and based on the results of this, we're going to decide how many people you should get next quarter. What test design do you need? Now, before then, I don't know the results of that test. I certainly am interested in a fair answer to it, and I have to give you objective criteria. I can't simply fold my hands and push away from the table and be like, I don't want that test to run. No. And it's the same thing, media allocation. If you go to two teams and be like, look, online, offline, I need to run a test about where that money should go. What's the objective criteria that you will listen to and allow us to move? And both teams have to come to the table to set that objective criteria. They can't just fold their arms and say, no, I don't want that test. But if you do it afterwards and you say, hey, we ran a test without telling you, and now we're going to take your money, then you get those objections. And why wouldn't you? And so the earlier you bring the stakeholders together and agree on that course of action, the more successful your data-driven work, your experiments will be.
Yeah. To broaden it a little bit further, as you do in the book, you say challenge the going in question. You are really against having perfectionists on a data team, or efficiency consultants who are famous for saying things like, show me where the next single dollar needs to be spent, right? These set up false dichotomies, don't they? That the real gold here is, how do we think about this? And, is offline versus online the right, is that where we should have this, wrestling match? Or should we have it against, something else? But there will invariably be other things, if you're talking to those teams, that come up that you all say, you know what, we really could use the answer to that. And it's not going to be as easy or as discrete in terms of how we can, make a binary decision, but those will be the ones that truly give you insights into your customers.
Oh boy. All right. I got telling stories here. I'm reminded of this actually when you're bringing this up. We had our previous at Google, before Ruth became our CFO a couple of years ago. Before that was Patrick Pichette, and he used to do these all hands with companies about our earnings calls and where growth is. And he generally had this observation. He said, "Growth solves all problems for a business." And it's like, if you're growing 22% a year, is like, you can deal with inefficiencies, you can deal with risk because you're still growing. But once you get focused on that efficiency and you start asking those questions about that next dollar, become so cautious and so conservative about where you invest that I really say when I look at a company and I see growth, I focus on it. And let me give you a practical example of that. I was working
Sure.
with two competing companies, and I was just curious. They were trying to solve the same data science problem, where and for one of them, it was, we need to build a model that forecasts where we should invest our money, like across the
Uh-huh.
entire funnel. Where do we invest it? So with that next dollar, where does it go? Does it go upper funnel into video? Does it go bottom funnel into search? Where do we put it? And they had a very reasoned approach. He said, look, we're going to collect the data. We're going to hire 30 people with advanced degrees, master's, PhD types, and we're going to solve this. And it's very difficult to argue against this, right? Very practical. You're going to collect data, hire experienced, smart people to solve it for you, and build something that reflects the uniqueness of your business. It's like, fantastic. And so I talked to their competitors. I'm like, all right, what are y'all doing? I said, all right, here's the plan. And I'm anxious and like, nervous with anticipation because this group is good. And I'm like, what are you going to do? And they're like, all right, we're going to put 30% of our money here and we're going to put 30% less there. It's like, what the hell are you guys? You guys are understaffed at the moment. Like, what's going on? They're like, no. They're like, we have a very simple strategy here. They're like, based on the rest of the market, we know everybody's trying to solve this. And we anticipate that it will take 18 to 24 months to solve. So here's what we're going to do. Knowing that our current strategy is suboptimal, we're going to start experimenting with different allocations, because the likelihood that we find one has to be better than a coin toss. And if we try different things, our hypothesis is we're going to find something better than this poor approach we're taking today to media allocation. And then when our competitors figure it out, we're just going to hire someone from that team because we'll have saved all this money that we can easily pay them. And so what they did was they just ran aggressive tests. And in this first test where they did 30%, I came back, I asked them how did it work. And they're like, hey, you know what? In 9 out of the 15 test markets, we made more money and it offset the risk in the failed markets. So we're already making more money. We didn't have to hire anybody and we're doing great. And so their approach has been, we don't necessarily need to understand all this behavior. We just need to keep trying to do different things. And where their data comes in is, tell us what are the opportunities and types of tests we should run. And media allocation in our market is inefficient. Therefore, we think it's a green field to try different things because we think that our current adaptation is so poor. And that's how they do it. And I went back, and
Right.
Here we are a couple of years later. I went back to this first company, the one that was building. And I wanted to be like, well, let's see,
Yeah.
did that investment pay off? And so I
It's
just started with a question.
monolithic thing.
Yeah, I said, so what's going on in this modeling space? And so now they're on their third CMO. CMO leans back. He's like,
Uh-oh.
they're like, they're like, we are doing fantastic. They're like, we just got board approval to hire 20 or 30 people with advanced degrees to help us build this model. And I'm like, we did this before. And they're like, I don't know that history. I don't know what happened. And they are still using the same methodology that they had more than a decade ago. Nothing has changed because they never found that perfect answer.
Yeah. And they're paralyzed because they haven't yet amassed the information that they think will, part the clouds and just reveal like a beam of sunshine what they need to do.
There it is.
They're paralyzed.
And now you have that perfect case where you write it on paper to say, how could this be wrong? We have budgeting, we have organizational buy-in, we have smart people, we know the objective, like, let's go do it. And then you're like, what is this competition doing? It's like, they're just something different because they know there's opportunity there and they're growing. And you just realize that sometimes you need to be thoughtful about these approaches and if you can actually solve what you're trying to solve for.
I think the main thing that I've walked away with from that example is you have to understand in the organization you're in or the client that you're serving what the culture is along that, highly refined surgical approach to a brute force, slightly better than a coin toss approach.
Exactly.
They're all going to be somewhere along there. You need to know where you are.
Exactly. There's a place
when we get into having clients. Yeah. When we get into having clients, you have very strong views. In fact, it makes up probably the largest part of the book on where we go wrong with treating them all the same. So it's not like you just, malign the marketers. You also point out that when we structure how we're interacting with a company, with our customer, and they're purchasing over time, that we lump them all together, and that you feel that we have to bring out the customer lifetime value.
Yes.
And you don't, say that it's just your own idea. I know that you give lavish credit to folks like Peter Fader at Wharton about this. Could you just distill for me in a nutshell why CLV should be something that we pay a lot of attention to for understanding why we're going to keep track of all this?
I just, the easiest way to distill it down is, again, very much like looking at our real lives. When we look at the people that we know, you look at your address book, or I don't know if you're going to your TikTok feed or your LinkedIn list, whatever you look at, you're going to realize that you have different relationships with those people, and certain people in your life contribute a lot more value than others. You have a lot of people that you meet and interact with where things are very transactional. You
Yeah,
go to a store and you buy a product once, or, I joke, people that take you back and forth to the airport. It's great for that moment. But then you also have your close friends, family members, colleagues, mentors, people that have taught you a lot, where you say, these people, I've received so much from them. I have maybe even given so much back, that these are the relationships I cherish. And it's just a matter of knowing who those people are and how you respond to them. If my good friends call me up over the phone, I'm going to answer that call. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. I'm not going to
yep,
pick up for my Uber driver. I don't know why the hell would he be calling me at 2 a.m. But it's the same thing with your customers, is understanding who are those customers that your business depends on versus who are those people that are more transactional. And what we see in the data overall is that a small portion of customers in nearly every business is responsible for a disproportionate amount of value. And if those customers come in, if two customers come in and one of them is slated to be one of those transactional, you'll never see them again, and another one is one that's going to be incredibly valuable, we would hope that you would treat those people differently. Or if you're going out and saying, I'd like to meet some more good people, that you would use some of the learnings from your previous interactions to figure out who those people are and how they behave towards you.
yeah. And you make it so simple to get started. In contrast to that example you gave, you don't have to have a big model. You boil it down to 3 columns in a spreadsheet.
Yes,
That
sir.
could be enough to get you started.
That's it. Yeah, isn't it surprising? People are like, "Yeah, are these models?" Yes, the models are that good, and it's that accessible that it's not some fantasy, as much as it is a practical thing if you know how to connect the dots and you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. By the way, we'll have a link to the template that Neil gives for that with the 3 columns. And when you pull that information in, yes, you are going to see other dimensions of information. If you start to, see the folks out in Wyoming, or the
Mhm.
folks who originally had an organic channel that they came in by, these things will start to become important. But the main thing that I took away from the book is that I need to look at where an individual customer fits in this range of what I think uh, a ideal customer would be, and that there's a floor and a ceiling. I've thought about the floor. I've thought about, okay, yes, it makes sense for me to spend X amount of dollars to acquire this revenue because it's over its lifetime going to be worth this.
Yeah.
But I didn't think about the ceiling, where you say, if I have a customer who is 90% of the way towards what I figure I'm going to need. I mean, there are certain product categories where if you've bought the whole lot, I don't know, Pokemon cards, right? Okay, you already own most of them. Why am I chasing you to try to get the last one or
That's
two? I mean, I think there's something like 800 or maybe 8,000 Pokemon cards. It's some enormous number. But, we need to stop and say, wait a minute, you're walking out the door. Maybe it's not my role to chase you.
that's it's an important lesson, and let's break it down into a few of them. First of all, it's one is just accepting the reality. First of all, that with any relationship, there's a certain amount of time or a certain distance you can go with it. Right? You're going to get with some people to say, look, no matter how much time I spend with you, I'm not going to turn you into a perfect person for me. And if anybody tries to convince you that, it's going to be an issue. So that's the
Yeah,
first thing we have to recognize. The second thing we have to recognize is that when we look at these relationships, to know that these relationships will not go on forever. There's going to be people where that relationship runs its course. And just because somebody spent a lot of money with you in the past doesn't mean that there's a lot of value there in the future. And that is just the relationship running its course. It's like
yeah,
great colleagues and mentors that I have at Google. Phenomenal while they're at Google. They understand and know how to work through the organization. They don't have a lot to contribute outside of it. And so you just accept, hey, we're having this great relationship. If we don't see each other every day, if we're not on the same team working on the same projects, I don't know if that relationship will be as valuable for the both of us afterwards. And I think what it means is that far too many companies will look and be like, you spent a lot of money in the past with me, so I'm going to do everything I can to keep you around. And when we look
Yeah.
at marketing money that's wasted, oftentimes it can be to say, look, you just have to be able to recognize and measure when that relationship is over and be comfortable with it.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the phrase, they're just not that into you. Maybe you shouldn't be that into them.
Exactly. Exactly. And be okay with
Um,
saying that. It's
right.
saving your time and resources. Like if you know a relationship isn't going to go anywhere, you don't keep going out on dates with that person. You say, hey, we had a good time, hopefully you part on good
Yeah.
terms. But it's time to go someplace else.
Or advocate for us, right?
Yes.
Be an ambassador for the brand. But if we have done everything that we can for you, then we're content with that.
Yeah. And we're happy and that's the thing. We're always happy for you to come back. It's not saying you're closing the door. No, you can never buy from me again. That would be terrible. We're not saying that.
No.
We're simply saying that we're not going to spend the same amount of time because we know what comes next. It's like we're still going to be polite. We're still going to welcome you with open arms if you come in, but we're not going to go above and beyond to say we know that you're going to be as profitable as you were previously, or that has some carryover into the future.
Yeah. And I think this is the perfect one to kind of bring in one last point that you made about the people element here and how organizations can sometimes get it wrong. Is if we don't think of it as being, bottom to top, a lowest quartile, highest quartile type thing, this thinking that more is always better seeps in. And this gets dangerous. You point out that incentives are often built off of metrics.
Mm-hmm.
We could even have a conversation about whether these things like customer lifetime value or amount of cost to acquire the customer for their CLV. We can have a debate over whether those should even be metrics that we, aim people around. But we have to be cautious because once we do, their behavior as our executives, as our frontline staff will change.
Yes.
And maybe not in a good way.
It's an and that ties back to that central lesson, which when we were talking about the automotive company, that this should not be seen ever as a static journey, a process. It should never be a question that you can answer. It's a question you always get better at. Customer preferences, your responses will continue to evolve. As you learn more about your customers, as markets develop, their behaviors and their responses will be different. And that means that you have to change the way you act. But I wouldn't want to look at it into the context to say, if you learn something new about a customer that changes the way you behaved previously, that all of a sudden what you were doing previously was wrong. It's the evolution in the relationship that you need to be mindful of. Is that every time you learn something new and you try to apply it, you try to personalize that experience, offer coupons, not offer coupons, change your products, there will be a reaction from customers. And just what you really want to focus on is not at any point finding the right answer and saying this is the ultimate product that we can build. But just when you look back at it to say, we've learned so much about how our customers want to engage with us, what we're supposed to say at the right time, so that we feel we're a better partner for our customers, that they're going to have a better conversation and relationship with us than they can any other company or any other vendor they go to. So effectively, it comes down to you can say in the most dramatic terms that our customers love us, or in a more practical sense to say when they talk to us, they feel like they connect with us, that when we're capturing data, when we're interacting together, that we are applying it in a productive way that helps us both.
Yeah, and that's reciprocal. That's, I think, the diametric opposite of the executive who is bonused on a single metric and who does things that don't make sense with that customer, but it's because the next bonus rides on making this KPI go high.
Yes.
One area that, and you wouldn't be, in a place like where you are if you didn't say this, we should absolutely take the information about what a customer ends up for a lifetime value being, and we should feed that information back to ad platforms because it does help them tune for the right kind of customers that we should be bringing in. Is there anything else you can tell us on that?
I would say whether it's a precise lifetime value or it's just a general characteristic, the goal is to be able to provide other people with a signal to say, hey, we like these customers. We don't like these customers. And it doesn't have to be the
Right.
precise lifetime value. In some cases, just we like these customers a little bit more than that. It's very binary. It's to say our average customer is worth X, and we want customers that are going to be worth a little bit more, and here's who they are. Simply providing that signal is helping the partners that you rely on for delivering new marketing, whether those are leads or customers or sales, to be able to benefit from who you know you're most compatible with. So, yeah, I like those people. Yeah, avoid those people.
Yeah.
But just letting them know. Otherwise, what happens? They maximize for the here and now, for the volume, for everything that we're talking about getting away from. And so really what you're looking at here is whether you're an individual department that's using lifetime value, to share that with other departments so they know you're incentivized by it. If you're working with other partners or affiliates, to let them know how you see success in your business. And so that way they can deliver those types of opportunities back to you.
Couldn't have said it better. Neil, if people want to find out about the book or more about you, where can they go?
Easiest place is on convertedbook.com. That's the book's website. You'll be able to download an excerpt of the first couple of chapters. I usually say 5 minutes with the book. You'll know right away if it's a book for you or if it's not your thing. But give it at least that chance. There's also a whole bunch of resources on there for toolkits and readers of the book that you'll find. And I'm also accessible on LinkedIn. Sometimes people just like to follow me on social media, see what I'm reading about, the insights that we're finding before we take, I guess, a 2-year publication cycle for a new book.
Right. Or they might be able to catch you at a conference near them. I will just say, yes, they'll know in the first few pages. I have to say, the style is very approachable. You obviously got editorial approval from your wife because just like you have in this conversation, you bring her up a lot and, the parallels with relationships in real life. So I find it very easy to read in that way. So, Neil, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
Glenn, thank you so much again for having me.
Great. And to the listener, I hope you got value out of today. And I encourage you to go to the show notes to find the resources that Neil has given us here. And I hope that you came away with something that helps you make your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.